because I feel like strong women can really lift each other up. And so this is going to be more than just a conversation. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to give an introduction. You can see she's beautiful. She's
Oh,
strong, she's talented, and she has so much to share. So, Diana, we're just going to let me stop running my mouth. Would you please introduce yourself and give a brief overview of who you are to the family?
sure. Well, thank you, Fam. I appreciate you having me here on this podcast. My name is Diana Lauritson, and I am a podcast host of the podcast Breaking Rank, which features unconventional leaders and leadership done differently. I'm also a legal industry strategist. I am a survivor of trauma and domestic violence. And I am also just a professional woman trying to navigate her career in systems that were not designed for me to succeed. So here I am.
Here she is. See, and that's the reason that I wanted to allow Diana to get. I could not do it justice. All of the things that you mentioned, I am very new in the podcast world, just started last year, but I am loving every moment of it because of the fact that I get to connect with people like you and have real conversations, real people having real conversations. That's truly what Unapologetically D is about.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you are a trauma survivor and
Mhm.
that you are here in helping, systems that were not created for you to succeed, but you are successfully navigating through those systems.
Mhm.
And not only are you successfully navigating through those systems, but you are wanting to help others while doing that. And that to me speaks volumes because of the fact that I've always wanted to help people, whether it was, in my professional life, mentoring individuals, or in my cycling or fitness world. There's something about connecting with people and being able to help them. So
Mhm.
let's get into some specifics that I really feel, truly, like I was telling Diana before we started, things don't happen by chance. I really honestly feel like everything happens for a reason, and here we are having this
Mhm.
conversation, and we're going to get into some specifics. I think maybe to set like the stage, let's go
Sure.
into detail a little bit more about who was Diana before you were who you are now.
Who I have a very kind of interesting upbringing. My dad was actually a pimp. And so I grew up um, seeing, and he was a lot older. My dad was born in 1928. He passed away in 2013. And I grew up very unconventionally. We moved around all the time. So I went to like 10 elementary schools, three junior highs, seven high schools. I was all over the place. And I learned a lot, I would say a lot in my formative years about um, how life is so different for different people who walk different walks in life. And basically with my dad, I saw him with his girlfriends. He always had more than one wife or more than one girlfriend. Sorry, not wife. And then he had women that worked for him. And so I grew up thinking that was normal. I just didn't know that I wasn't sure, really, that there was a different path than this. I saw some examples of differences, but I grew up seeing women treated in a very different way, usually not the most positive way. I witnessed a lot of abuse and things like that. And I also am a survivor of abuse growing up. My mother was very mentally ill, and she has lived with her mental illness, her entire life.
Mhm.
And so it was a challenge for me to kind of deal with both sides of my family. And then on top of that, I am also multiracial. And
Mhm.
so I always had the whole where do you belong? Which culture do you, can you assimilate to the best and the most?
Mhm.
And so that was, a growing pain for me as well, trying to figure out who exactly am I?
Mhm.
And then when I was about 15 years old, 14, I was 14, my mom had married a man who uh, told her that my older sister and I could no longer live in the house. And so when I was 14 and my sister was 16, my mom kicked us out of the house. And so I was at a point where I was like, where do I go? Who do I stay with? What do I do? And so I lived basically on the streets. I stayed on people's couches. If I didn't have a place to stay, I would
Mhm.
stay awake and just walk everywhere. And one of my friends was in a similar situation to me as well.
Mhm.
And her and I, um, we protected each other and we looked out for each other. And we met up with some friends from school who found out that we were essentially homeless
Mhm.
and offered to let us stay at their house. And so we stayed there. Well, they sold drugs. And
Oh,
so that was a situation where, and I don't know how much of this I should be getting into on your podcast.
no, please.
Yes.
Please get into all of it. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes. I welcome
Yes.
that. Hmm.
So they sold drugs, and one day,
Oh my goodness.
and so obviously it was the first time in my life I had ever seen,
Hmm.
and it was a really scary, terrifying situation that I had to then navigate and figure out where do I go from here because we're about to be in some big trouble.
Yeah.
And it was just traumatizing. I still remember everything I was wearing. I remember how my hair was done that day. I remember all of those things. And after that, it was just kind of a shit show. It was, the police came in, all of these different things happened. I had left and moved to Kansas to stay with my aunt, and the police followed me there,
Oh,
and basically said, you have the option. You can either tell us what happened or you're going to jail. And just because of who my dad was and how I was raised, I was always taught, don't be a snitch, don't be a
yeah,
snitch.
yeah. Hmm.
And so I didn't tell them anything. And so sure enough, I was arrested. I was put in juvenile detention when I was 15.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where my story really takes off. I was in juvenile detention for about 6 months. And then I got the opportunity to go to what is called Boys Town.
Okay.
And Boys Town is a place in Omaha. It's an actual real town with a police department, a fire department, everything, a high school, a elementary school. But it's a place where they have what they call family teachers who are basically married couples who you live with.
Okay.
And they kind of model and demonstrate what it's like to live in a more structured family environment. So I went to Boys Town and I really thrived there. I had
Hmm.
always done very well in school. I had always been in very advanced classes. So I thrived at Boys Town. I ended up graduating high school, getting a full ride scholarship to Creighton University.
Yes.
So I went to Creighton, got my undergrad degree, and then I got two master's degrees after that. And, I work in the legal industry now. I work for one of the largest law firms in the world. And I, have been kind of thriving ever since. But the memories and the trauma always lives inside you. And
Yeah.
so there's always those moments where I sit down and I remind myself where I came from and how far I've come.
Hmm. That is wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. That is, I had to like take a moment because 14.
Hmm.
And then now while this was going on and you're going through this transition and this, tragedy takes place and you're a young girl and
Hmm.
then you have to make these moves and go to juvenile detention, were you able to stay in connection with your sister while this is happening?
So I did stay in touch with my family. Like I said, it was tough because my mother was really mentally ill, and she was part of the reason why I was there.
Mm.
I was kicked out, and now my mom and I have a great relationship. She visits me regularly in DC,
Oh, good.
and we have a great relationship now. But at the time, it was really tough to forgive her
Mm.
because of the situations that I had to endure. I mean, when you were a young woman living on the streets, there were all kinds of things from, I would stay the night at people's houses and I'd wake up and grown men would be trying to take my pants off or do crazy things like that. And so there was a lot of hurt and anger and betrayal
Yeah.
that I've had to process in the meantime. But now I can say that we have, really worked on our relationship. I've been in therapy. She's been in therapy. My sisters have been in therapy. And so it's a healing process.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I have talked about consistently throughout my podcast, whether it be on episodes with guests or just on little snippets, is
Hmm.
your healing journey and it being your healing journey. And
Hmm.
there is no timeline. And however, which way you need to heal is whatever you need to do. And
Hmm.
you can have people in your corner that want to lift you up and support you throughout that healing journey, but it's yours. And that's
Hmm.
the most important thing that I think that needs to be recognized. And when you're coming through from trauma and able to rise and become the woman that you are today. And let me tell, when I said resonate with things, like, okay, I just asked my parents this maybe like a couple of months ago. I said, now, mom, how come you guys didn't put me into acting class? Because as I've gotten more into my podcast and like trying to be
Hmm.
creative and do things other than just my podcast and like fashion stuff and then my fitness, I said, I realized that my personality like really is like something that is different on camera. Like,
Hmm.
how come you didn't put me into acting now? She said,
Yeah.
now, daughter, you know you wanted to be a lawyer. And I said, I know, mom, but I'm really bad at taking tests, like real bad at taking tests. And she said, no, I think you would do fine if you just, and I said, Mom, I've
Hmm.
had to go through a lot of different trainings. And there are some advanced trainings that you can do if you want to get certificates through certain manufacturers. And my test taking skills are just not there.
Hmm.
And so I know when you go into the field of law,
Hmm.
there are a lot of different tests that you need to now put me in front of a huge crowd, tell me to speak, ask me something verbally, but it's something about being able to put it down onto paper. And that's just not
Hmm.
my jam, Diana. It's just not my jam. So my hat goes off to you. But that was one when you said you work in the legal field and for one of the largest law firms in the world, that to me is like, oh my goodness, like that's huge because again, that is what I wanted to do. I just saw myself being a lawyer. As a matter of fact, my parents still call me Counselor Bond. And it's because I always have something to say that is on the opposite side. I always
Hmm.
want to prove but what if this? But what, and also,
Always the devil's advocate.
yes, yes. And I also am the type of individual that is always a glass half full for the most
Hmm.
part type of a person, right? So I'm looking for the good in people. And my husband said, well, I'm just going to tell you, sometimes there's not good in people. And I said, yeah, I know. I know. I realize that. I understand that now. So, um, we're going to get a little bit more into leadership because I
Hmm.
know that that is something that is a huge part of your platform. Wisdom there is that you can share with them.
Hmm.
Leadership is a huge role because it has been and continues to be one of, I think, the least talked about or focused on areas in
Hmm.
companies. I think that leadership is just something that's there. And once you get to a certain point, there are certain standards that no longer people feel like they need to be upheld to. And once
Hmm.
they've gotten to that, whatever that role is, they're just like, oh, whatever. And they are no longer really connecting with the people. So, can you talk a little bit about your approach to leadership and
Sure.
kind of what has gotten you to that point?
Yeah. Well, I think leadership is a buzzword, right? Everyone talks about leadership and they talk about leadership from a standpoint of leadership being management. And management and leadership are two very different things. You can be a manager and
Mhm.
not be a leader. You can be a leader and not be a manager. So I
Mhm.
think those things are separate, but I think leadership gets used synonymously with a lot of things that it's not. And for me, I got sick of seeing the same types of leaders, right? That show up every day in our offices. We go to work and we see the same types of people that fill the leadership roles.
Mhm.
And when I say leadership, I don't mean that as in they're leaders, but they have a higher title or a
Yeah.
higher position.
Mhm.
And leadership is not about the title. And
Mhm.
so one of the biggest things about my platform is unconventional leadership because I grew up seeing all different kinds of leadership. I saw drug dealers that were leaders that
Uh-huh.
could
Uh-huh.
inspire and motivate people and could get them, and then I've had people with multiple degrees and PhDs that can't lead to save their life, right? And
Mhm.
so it gets to a point where you want to carve out what does leadership actually mean to you and what makes a good leader. And I think there's a lot of things that play into that. I think, being having empathy is a really good leadership characteristic. I think being able to motivate and inspire people, I
Mhm.
think being able to protect people, being
Mhm.
able to guide them and mentor them are all characteristics of a good leader. But I think that leadership oftentimes is confused with titles and with people that are in charge, and that doesn't necessarily make a great leader.
Facts. That is facts. Matter of fact, I will say this. I have had a lot of conversations with my son, which has been such a blessing for me as I've watched him grow up
Hmm.
and go and transition through different jobs and now into what has now become his career.
Hmm.
And he's had different people that were in management and or leadership roles for him throughout. And I
Hmm.
said to him, I have people in my life that have been both a man, they knew how to manage a
Hmm.
staff, but they also led by example. Therefore, I
Hmm.
considered them a leader. And I've had people that were just managers. That's all they focused on was the numbers. And really, honestly, they checked boxes.
Hmm.
And then I had people that were leaders, but had absolutely no idea on how to manage personnel and how to deal with the different conflicts that might take place. And
Hmm.
you only have control over yourself, right? You don't have control over these other people. So the one thing that I always try to encourage him to do was to just stay consistent in who you are,
Hmm.
right? Be who you are regardless, because not everybody is going to like you. Not everything is always going to be perfect, but you know who you are. And you're always going to be, bringing 100% of that to the table each and every time. right? So
Yeah.
it's sometimes it's difficult. I know in my past I've had people that were absolutely not leaders, and with my personality, because I'm a little bit of both my mom and my dad. My dad is
Hmm.
very chill. My mom is a firecracker. She has no problem saying it like it is. Sometimes she, because I'm also a truth teller. Now I know that maybe these people are not telling us the truth, but you don't need to necessarily just tell them outright to their face, you know? And I'm like, but why? We're all adults. Like, why can't we just have that conversation? Well, you still need to maintain that professional,
Hmm.
and that I've learned a lot from different people throughout my career. Always considered myself a sponge. And just in our brief conversations, that is exactly um, the type of woman that you seem to be to me. Am I
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely a sponge. I think that for me, I've always really admired and respected people that know more than what I know. I feel like I was blessed enough to be around people, even growing up the way that I grew up,
Hmm.
that knew more than me.
Hmm.
And that's the only way to grow and learn. I have been in situations where I've been around people who I don't feel know as much as me. And that's not, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But if I'm in a job or a work environment, I want to be around people who are going to teach me something, who are going to take me to that next level.
Mhm.
And you can't grow and develop when you have people that are not as smart or as talented or as bright as you.
Yep.
And that might sound very controversial, but people like me get inspired by people who are smarter than me. I'm attracted to, even in the men I like, right? I like nerds. I
Mhm.
like brains. I'm attracted to intelligence. And
Mhm.
so for me, I like to be around people that know more than me. When I hire people, I
Mhm.
like to hire people that have better skills than I have.
Mhm.
I think sometimes that can be intimidating for managers. Um, as a leader, it's not intimidating because you are putting people in place that know what they're doing,
Mhm.
that can teach you a thing or two,
Mhm.
and that are gonna, that what do they say? The rising tide floats all boats, when you
Yep.
surround yourself with people that know more than you, that you can learn from, you're only
Mhm.
going to benefit and grow from that. And so
Yes.
those are the environments that I prefer.
Yes. I've always said that I am like a sponge, and the more I learn, the better I feel I can offer as a well-rounded
Mhm.
employee or manager or leader or whatever, in whatever role I am in. Which, by the way, Diana, you and I are gonna have to talk after this podcast for sure. I feel like I've made a connection that's going to last for a very long time. Oh, and by the way, if you are watching this, thank you for being here with us. You are here with Diana Lauritson and myself. D, we are on unapologetically D. And why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Hit it, hit it, hit it. Share, comments, love, spread, all the things so we can keep on doing this. So when we talk about leadership and kind of just how people do things and how they operate in the world, the professional or business setting nowadays, it's
Hmm.
just very, very different. It's very, very different. And so I'm really trying to fully embrace this chapter.
Mm.
It's
Wow.
crazy. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, this conversation that you and I are having is like the timing couldn't be any better. Like, there's a lot that I can learn. And like, I just really like the connection and I'm excited to continue the conversation. So,
Yeah.
um, let's talk before we talk about a moment in your career. Let's talk
Mhm.
a little bit more about your career. You mentioned that you
Sure.
work for one of the largest legal firms. So, what is your actual job? What do you?
Yeah, so my actual job is I work in business development at a global law firm, and my job is to really help the firm to grow revenue,
Mm,
to nurture client relationships, to coach the lawyers, to work on business plans, manage budgets, all of the things. But the main goal is to help the lawyers and support them to pitch to get new business, and from all different kinds of clients. And it's a really interesting industry because most people in my industry do not look like me. They don't have braids, they're not people of color. You don't see a lot of women that look like me in my industry. And that was one of the biggest things that I noticed when I got into this industry because I came from working in government relations and public affairs. I was a
oh,
political science major. I worked for the mayor, and then I worked in state and federal politics and international politics. And I got into the law firm, business very by chance. My second master's degree is from a law school. And so I am, comfortable doing mediations and arbitrations and things like that. But I don't do any of that in my day-to-day job other than really using those skills to deal with very difficult lawyer personalities. And
okay.
so, yeah, so in my role, I've learned that I feel like I have a responsibility in a way because I'm really big into DEI. I'm really big into bringing others up with me. I try to hire in a way that is as broad and open as possible,
Mm-hmm.
to let all kinds of diverse candidates be, considered. And I think it's really important to open doors for people and to be voices for them.